So behind me here, I've got a whole bunch of different style of target butts. So target butt being the actual foam that'll go behind the targets. Some countries call them a boss, we call them a target butt in Australia. This is basically what you're going to pin your target faces onto. So one of the things that really confuses me about new archers or established archers in the sport is they spend a lot of money on arrows, heaps of time fletching them, grain matching them or getting them really, really precise, and then they shoot them into cardboard or plastic rather than just spending a bit of money and getting an actual archery target. We hear a lot of horror stories. Hay bales are a big one. People shooting arrows into hay bales, going down to collect them, and then they found they've got half a dozen or a dozen arrows buried in the middle of the hay bale that are essentially lost. Whereas, you know, they've lost $100 worth of arrows, they could have bought a target for $150 and saved that from happening. So it's something that really confuses me, why people won't actually buy a quality target. I'm going to go through the reasons why it's important, one for your arrows and two just for ease of use. So a couple of things to consider is if you're a target archer or if you're a bow hunter. And if you're a bow hunter, are you going to be using field points or are you going to be using a broadhead? So obviously a broadhead's going to leave bigger holes in your target, you're going to wear through it a lot faster, and you want something that's going to be easy to pull out of the target as well. Some of the broadheads that have kind of angled blades on them are a real nightmare to try and pull out of a target. So you might even want something softer that will actually poke the broadhead through the back of the target. You can unscrew and then pull the rest of the arrow out. That can be easier as well. So the targets we stock here, looking from a hunter's perspective, these are your BCE targets. So the BCEs are produced up in Sydney. They're a really, really popular target for us. We don't get a lot of Australian designed or Australian produced products for archery at all in Australia. So we try and get the Australian made stuff in or produced or designed as much as possible. So these targets, like I said, come out of Sydney. You've got two different styles. You've got a field cube and then you've got this eco cube here. We look at the difference between the two. The eco cube is kind of wrapped in this like bag material. They're quite heavy. They've actually got a handle in there to carry them around as well. You've got different spots to aim at on each side. So the important thing is spreading out the wear when you're shooting a target, not just shooting the same spot all the time. Now this is good, but pulling a broadhead out of this material is going to be quite tricky. So that's where we normally recommend something like the field cube. This is also a lot lighter as well, and this is high density foam. So when you're pulling out a broadhead, you're not worried about little kind of chunks of plastic or bits of target stuffing getting in the way. It'll just come out a lot more cleanly on something like this. So your field cube's 200, your eco cube's 150. So they're not crazy expensive given how much you'd probably put into a set of arrows or how much time you put into the arrows building them up as well. So these are the ones we get people started with most of the time, your eco cube or your field cube. Eco cube is going to be for your field points, field cube is going to be for your broadheads. The other thing to consider is if you've got a 60-70 pound compound and you might have a child or someone's friend shooting with you that might be shooting a 10 or 15 pound recurve, a lot of the time they'll just bounce straight off one of those. And one of the most frustrating things for younger archers is when they're shooting and the arrows are bouncing off the target. So we want something they're actually going to stick into, and that's where your cheaper targets sometimes are better. So one of these is one of your red zone 75 centimeter targets. Actually comes with little stands and legs as well, so it's still on the ground. You're going to blow straight through that with a compound, but because it's thin enough material, it'll stop all your light recurve bows up to about 30 pounds or so. So that's something to consider as well, is getting a target for your intended use. So if you're trying to use a target for your 70 pound bow and a 10 pound bow, it'll work for one but probably not for the other, and vice versa. So definitely keep in mind when you're buying a target, what's going to be, you know, what are you going to use it for the most. Behind me here we've got all of our bush bow 3D targets as well. So again, trying to support the Australian designed and produced targets. A lot of these are made in Langwarrin, which is just down the road from us here. So you can get foxes, cats, we've got rabbits on the counter as well. Whole bunch of different designs. These are really, really handy because it's very different aiming at a circle versus aiming at an animal. So if you're practicing on a rabbit outline or a fox outline, when you actually go hunting, you're going to be more comfortable in that position because you're used to aiming at that outline. So that's another thing to consider if you're going to be doing mostly hunting. it's probably beneficial to have something like this. You don't have to go all the way out and buy a massive deer target, but even just a rabbit or a fox, so you're used to aiming at something without a defined circle, so you're kind of having to search around for where the vitals would be. The other ones, which are super popular, are your Reinhart 18-1 targets. So to my knowledge, these are the only targets on the market that actually come with a warranty. So they guarantee if you shoot out all 18 sides within a year, they'll actually give you a replacement. We've never had to do that, so I don't know how that works, but they're super popular. They're getting more into your 260, 270 kind of range, because you're obviously freighting targets over from the States. Postage is a big part of that, but they're very, very popular as well, and they're quite easy for arrow removal. A little bit heavier than your field cube, but that's a popular choice of target as well. The main thing to consider is, regardless of what target you buy, if you keep pinning a target face in exactly the same spot and shooting out the same spot again and again and again, if you've got a 1.2 meter wide target and you're shooting 18 meters at a dot that big, you're going to shoot it out regardless. So the point of bigger targets is actually spread out your arrow impacts. So on a Reinhart, if you've got 18 sides, make sure you're not just shooting exactly the same spot again and again and again. Try and spread out the arrows across each side. Same with one of your eco cubes or your field cubes. Try and spread out the arrows. Even on the front side where you've got 5 spots, shoot 5 arrows, aim one at each spot. Don't shoot 5 straight into the middle. Your arrows will last longer, your target will last longer, and you'll just get better longevity out of your stuff at the end of the day. So that's the big rule with targets, is spreading them out. And ultimately what it boils down to with a target is you get what you pay for. You don't have to spend $300, $400 on the target, but if you spend $50 on the target online, we see photos all the time of people putting arrows straight through it into trees, shooting for half an hour and the target just crumbles. You really get what you pay for with targets. The foam, especially on stuff like the Reinharts and the bush bows, the foam is quite expensive, and it takes a bit of fiddling to actually get the right mold and the right kind of, I guess, construction of foam to stop the arrows without, being too hard so you can't get them out, or too soft you go through, or where you get targets where you shoot into them and the foam melts on your arrows. So you really get what you pay for. I'd avoid pretty much anything south of $100. If you're looking at $50, $60 targets on eBay, they're not going to last you very long. If you buy 3 of those, you may as well have just bought an eco cube or a field cube, essentially. The last thing as well is arrow lube. So this stuff here is called arrow snot. Scorpion Venom's another brand. We just like this because it's a bit similar price, and the tube's a lot bigger, so you get a lot more, lube for your money, I suppose. So this is arrow snot. They're 25 bucks for a tube. This will last you forever. And when you're shooting, you literally just put a tiny bit up the first half inch or so of the arrow, and then as you shoot into your target, it makes it heaps easier to pull it out. And you'll also find over time that it kind of lubes the target for you. So if you shoot 100 arrows into it with lube, it'll actually stay in the target and it'll make it heaps easier to pull out. So arrow lube is something we definitely recommend, especially with your high poundage compounds. But ultimately, when it boils down to targets, think about whether you're going to be using broadheads, field points, whether it's going to be a youth bow, if you're going to be shooting animals and need to practice on an outline, if you want something with a warranty. All these different factors come into it. Essentially, it comes down to avoid the $50 eBay targets, I'd say, and just consider the money you've put into arrows. If you're throwing them into cardboard or plastic, whether it would be better just spend another $150, $200 and get something that will last. And then as you're buying more arrows, you're going to get more life out of your arrows because they're shooting into soft foam or soft plastic that's designed to stop them, and you're going to be replacing arrows a lot less. All of the targets we've spoken about today are available at elizaarchery.com.